Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to Marky Picks. We've been absolutely cooking lately, sitting about 14 out of 18 on the last three slips I posted, nearly cashing perfect 6 for 6. And here's the thing, even if you're not riding with every single one of these picks, you should still be stacking up some free wins as long as you pick the right ones. I'm looking to ride that momentum into tonight's slate with some Monday Night Football action and some MLB action. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first pick of the slip we're rolling with. We're rolling with Lamar Jackson over 197.5 passing yards on the discount line. Now, I'll be real with you guys. I don't love this discount as much as some others, but anytime you get a discount, it's usually smart to take advantage of it. My projection for Lamar sits at about 217.6 passing yards, while his original line is actually set up at 233.5. Personally, if I was just playing the original line, I'd be leaning the under there. But since we're getting the discount at 197.5, I'm grabbing the over. If you want to get creative, you could even run two slips, one with the discount over and one with the regular line under. There's a good chance Lamar Jackson lands somewhere in the middle between those. So that could give you a solid shot at cashing both. For some quick matchup insight, the Lions' passing defense is pretty much league average. They could clamp down and make it tough, or they could give up some yardage. So, you really have to have some flexibility here. For me, I'll take the over on the discount line, but don't be surprised if I also run a slip with the under 233.5. Next up, we got Jared Goff over 0.5 rushing yards. Yeah, I know this one looks risky on paper, but hear me out. My projection has him about 4.8 rushing yards, and we only need him to sneak across the line for just 1 yard. Now, quick note, this isn't like college where sacks count against rushing yards, so the risk is really just whether he decides to tuck it and run. Last year, Goff hit this line at 11 out of 18 games. So this year, he's already picked up 6 yards against Chicago. And even though he went -1 rushing yards versus Green Bay, that was against one of the strongest defenses in the NFL. The Ravens' defense can definitely bring some pressure. I think this actually works in our favor here. If they collapse the pocket, Goff might be forced to move, and that's all we need. One little scramble for a single yard, and we're cashing it. So. Now, if you're not comfortable with the rushing yard line, you could also look at his passing yards at 260.5. My projection there is 280.3. So that's another solid play, but for this slip, I'm riding with the rushing line here, banking on him to sneak past that 0.5 line. So moving over to some MLB action, I'm locking in MacKenzie Gore over 4.5 strikeouts. My projection has him at about 5.84 strikeouts. So this line here at 4.5 just feels too low. On this season, Gore has gone over this number in 21 of 29 games. That's a really strong hit rate. Now, I'll admit he's been trending downward over his last 15 starts, but recently he started to show flashes of getting back to that elite strikeout form we saw earlier in the year. So, with this being one of his, if not his final start of the season, I fully expect him to go out there and dominate. At 4.5, this feels like one of the stronger MLB spots on the board tonight. For pick number 4, I'm going with Nick Pivetta under 4.5 hits allowed. My projection has him at about 4.27 hits allowed, which is close to the line. But with such a limited slate tonight, we've got to take some spots that come down to just feel. And here's why I like the under here. Milwaukee is traveling out west, and I think there's a chance they come out a little sluggish at the plate. Looking at the numbers, Pivetta has gone under this line in 17 of 30 games this season. Recently, he missed in 3 of his last 5, but I expect him to bounce back here and put together a solid outing. Now, if you want another angle on Pivetta, his strikeout line at 5 looks pretty strong too. I've got him projected at 6.15 Ks there, but for this slip, I'm sticking with the under on his hits allowed. For the 5th pick, I'm taking Michael McGreevy under 22.5 pitcher fantasy score. My projection has him at about 18.95, so we're basically saying he's not going to have a dominant outing tonight. Here's the spot. The Giants are coming back home, and while their playoff hopes are fading fast, this is the type of game where they either lay down and fold, or they come out swinging and show that they've still got some fight left. If they want to prove anything, it's got to start tonight, and that means putting runs on the board and chasing McGreevy out of this game early. I like the matchup for San Francisco, and I just don't see McGreevy doing enough to clear this 22.5 fantasy score line. And for the last pick, we're switching over to some hitter fantasy score with Fernando Tatis Jr. under 6.5. My projection has him at 4.6. And here's why I like the under. You know, Tatis is facing Freddie Peralta, who's been a flat-out elite this season. And even in that conversation for the Cy Young this year, you know, with this being one of Peralta's final starts of the year, I expect him to bring some of his best stuff. And, you know, that should keep Tatis in check tonight. I'm rolling with the under 6.5 fantasy score. So let's recap the full 6-pick slip. We got Lamar Jackson over 197.5 passing yards discount line. Also, look at the under 233.5 passing yard discount, the regular line. If you want to play both slips, that's probably the best thing I would do. I'm probably going to do that off camera, is just duplicate this slip and take the under Lamar Jackson 233.5 passing yards. Pick number 2, we got Jared Goff over 0.5 rushing yards. Pick number 3, MacKenzie Gore over 4.5 strikeouts. Pick number 4, Nick Pivetta under 4.5 hits allowed. Pick number 5, Michael McGreevy under 22.5 pitcher fantasy score. And rounding out the slip, Fernando Tatis Jr. under 6.5 hitter fantasy score. That's the squad for tonight's smaller slate, you know, mixing in some Monday Night Football and MLB action. We're on a 14 out of 18 run over the past 3 slips, and I'm looking to keep this hot streak alive. If you're rocking with these plays, drop a comment down below. Let me know which picks you're tailing. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my future slips. And let's cash this one tonight, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.